I decided to create a leadership consulting company for women after having worked as a leadership consultant and an OD consultant at different management consulting firms for many, many years. And what I realized was that there were certain needs, very unique needs that some of the women leaders that I was working with, often those needs were not being met in the marketplace. And that inspired me to start my company because I felt we need something a little bit different. And that different is not bad. So we're gonna dive into the material. You know, one of the big challenges that HR are often faced with, one of the biggest ones right now, is partnering with the business. You know, playing that advisory role. You know, being able to, whether it's consult and provide value in different ways that perhaps 20, 25 years ago, that wasn't the expectations. You know, as these shifts continue to happen, thinking about partnerships in a way that is holistic, but allows you to come at it into your organization in a way that provides not just value, but also provide a sense of consistency and a framework and a model and an approach to think about, okay, how can I do what I do in a way that serves others that is also meaningful for me? And that's essentially what the 3 C's of leadership is about. And so when I was developing that framework, I was primarily also thinking about women, some of the challenges that we often face. And I've seen some of the same themes surfacing over and over again. You know, like some of it around confidence. You know, people feel like they have the imposter syndrome, or that they're not so sure they can do things, even though they actually are doing it. So some of our learning objectives today is to think about how we can make incremental mindset shifts to accelerate learner performance. How we frame complex problems and into often learning opportunities, and how that can be done in a way that is both bottom up and top down, so that you have people that are able to think about how they solve problems in a way that may not always be the traditional way of doing things. Defeating the imposter syndrome. Does anyone here not know what the imposter syndrome is? They've never heard of that term. So everyone here, okay. So the idea of the imposter syndrome is that demonstrating more and more that a lot of women, even though they may be highly competent in an area, whatever it is that they do, they may not, and they could be at the highest level of their profession, they may not always feel that they belong there. And so that they feel like they're an imposter. You know, and you know, even though like they have the credentials, they have the education, they have the credibility, they're always wondering, okay, do I really belong here? And I can imagine, you know, when you're one among many, you can start to feel that way. And so this is something that they've been finding, also doing research, like research has been done from millennials to even older women, that more and more, this is becoming evident, that some women actually, even though they have all the credibility in the world, don't always really believe that they are where they're supposed to be, even if they're in a high position. And then lastly, thinking about how we can foster a very safe environment to explore collaboration. How we can do that in a way that is, again, meaningful to us, is impactful, but allows the business to continue to do what it needs to do, but at the same time, we're also feeling like we're bringing value to the work that we're doing. Partnerships in time of crisis. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, these last few months has been very, very difficult. Who here could raise their hand and say, yeah, everything's been great, like I really haven't been troubled by anything these last few months? Please feel free to raise your hand. I would love to see that person. It's been hard. You know, from natural disasters, a lot of the political issues that are happening in Washington and also at the state level, you know, it's been a bit scary. And so when we ask ourselves, how do we get people to partner with each other and do it in a way that is fruitful and productive, when at the same time, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. And that's the reality we're in. Like, I wish we could all just wish it away, but we can't. You know, but life must go on. We have to continue doing what we're doing. I'm curious, and how do you continue, but not just keeping your head down and waiting for the storm to pass, but taking the opportunity to still get people to be productive, to be engaged, to find ways to create meaning in what they do, because most people spend, 8, 10, 12 hours at work. How do you get them while they're there to maybe even forget a little bit of what's going on outside and feel like what they do can help, it's contributing, it's doing something? Because right now, I do see it as an opportunity. Often amongst chaos is the opportunity to create something new, and perhaps something even beautiful. How do you feel your organization provided support? The reason why, you know, I asked this question is because, and I think these answers are great, because I could see that as far as meeting people's very basic physical needs, right? Shelter, food, water. Institutions are stepping in and they're helping on that end, right? And that's wonderful. That's exactly where the world needs to be. And that's exactly where organizations need to be. However, when we think about more the psychosocial, beyond the physical, right, your other needs, and Maslow's hierarchy, these other needs above that, what role do organizations play, particularly during moments of turbulence, crisis? What opportunities are also there where they can either bring together the people in their organization, they can find ways to crowdsource new ideas, and even maybe make those ideas part of something that's done in the future. I think about how important it is for us, particularly people who work in the human resources space, like how they can help their employees and people in organizations to better, to like be able to kind of step back and build greater self-awareness, right? Greater consciousness. Can institutions play a role in that, right? People spend most of their time there, where in the past people would be able to support their own personal development in different ways. Now, it's not as simple for a number of reasons, whether it's technology or the amount of time we spend working, or there are other elements of who we are that I ask myself, can more be done to support people to better know who they are? And from doing that, they tap into these areas. And that's to me what the 3 C's, that's what the 3 C's of leadership is. There's a famous Chinese proverb that says an intelligent person understands others. A brilliant person understands himself. I think about that. You think about this Chinese proverb about self-knowledge and why it's so important to know yourself. You find yourself, you start asking questions about, okay, how do I, if I'm trying to figure out who I am, what matters to me, where do I begin that? Do you begin it when you're very young, middle age, older in life, or when something, boom, hits you and you're like, oh my God, how did I get myself into this situation? And so when I think about courage, the first thing that comes to mind is often bias for action. And one thing you'll notice actually when you look at my models, I use a lot of women. And part of the reason for that is more and more the workforce is becoming more, there are more women. I think I believe in the United States there are more than 60% of university graduates entering the workforce are women. And I believe by 2025 it's going to be like closer to 65 to 68%. And so when I use like female models, it's to also give us the perception, okay, it's not always about always only moving towards the masculine, but also have representations of the feminine in what we see as well. It's good for our own sense of self. And so this model essentially looks at the idea of courage, confidence, and collaboration. From the perspective of with courage, you begin by being able to start asking questions about who am I, what is my purpose, am I in alignment, do I have the, and once you're able to do these things, you get to, do I have the courage to lead? The best leaders usually have gone through this process at some point in their ranks, in their profession. They have to. Because the very act of stepping into a leadership position requires that you have enough self-knowledge to know what you're able to do, enough self-belief so that you have self-efficacy. The self-efficacy is the ability to do. It's the ability to marshal resources, it's the ability to bring people together. And you have that when you believe in who you are and what you stand for. And you know what your purpose is and why you're doing certain things. So I'm just curious, within your organizations, what do, for some of you, how would you say this might translate? Whether it's initiatives or projects that you like, how does something like courage, which is based on self-awareness, and that self-awareness allows you to take action, how would you say that plays out in your organization? Part of it is people stepping out of their comfort zone, right? To gain the act of, to be courageous is to take an action, and often it might be something that is not popular. Other people might say no to it. However, it might actually be the right thing to do. So how do you actually go about that? How do you build the capabilities within your people so that when it is necessary, you have people who are able to come up with courageous ideas? The courage to actually make a decision that might not always be the most popular, but it might be the right one. All right, so the next one, confidence. This is one of my favorites. And part of it is because as a women's leadership coach, this is one that I find to be one of the biggest challenges I encounter when I'm working with highly competent women. And this is, and actually my office is in Brickell, Miami. A lot of the women I work with are in finance. And these are women who are in very masculine, and finance is still a very masculine industry, even though there's, more and more women are at the managerial level, but we know at the top it's still primarily male. And so there is this kind of conundrum that I'm seeing where often you have women who may be extremely competent, but it does not necessarily mean that they're extremely confident as well. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the imposter syndrome. I did a poll at a webinar that I conducted for the National Association of Professional Women in April. About 300 women attended that webinar. And in my polling, one of the questions I asked is, which one of these do you struggle the most with? Courage, confidence, or commitment? And about 43% said confidence. And I was a bit surprised by that. I wasn't. I was surprised because I was like, wow, these are women who are, either entrepreneurs or at the top of their games professionally, but yet confidence was still an area that, even from a professional standpoint, that the challenge is still very much there. And I found that as well in my coaching, that a lot of women were brilliant, but when I'm like, why don't you try this new thing? And they get back to me like in 2 weeks about what new steps you've taken. Oh no, I need to go and take another class. I need to go get more training. I need to go get more skills. And I'm like, actually, probably you're completely overskilled. But there's this need to go and get more education, get more knowledge, as opposed to like, okay, I'm actually gonna take a little risk. And there's this book called The Confidence Code that I love and I highly recommend it because it gets to this issue very well. Because one of the things it talks about, among many things, is how much, one of the ways we can become more confident is trying new things little by little all the time. And the more you take little actions, you feel like you have more courage and more confident along the way. So little risk allows you to be able to take bigger and more calculated risks in the future without fear of failure. Because the other side of that is the idea of, well, if I fail, I'm not perfect. And if you want to be a good girl, a good person, a lot of us when we're young, as we're told, then you have to always try to do the right thing. And God forbid you make a mistake and you fail. And this is something that is hurting a lot of people. And it's a very touchy subject, but one that I think is really important, especially when thinking about developing programs for women in leadership. There have been quite a lot of research out there done by INSEAD Business School in Paris, as well as London School of Economics, and other institutions, like Harvard Business Review does quite a lot of work around this as well, looking at how confidence can impact, on a large scale, when you take out also some of the structural impediments, because it's not just a question of like we need to fix something about us, about women, but there's also structural impediments as well. But confidence keeps a lot of people from actually, leaning in, stepping up, and trying new things. And so this is an area that fascinates me. I do a lot of work in this area because I think it's something that is very underrated. But when it is tackled, the rewards of gaining that over time can actually change people's lives drastically, and I have seen it. Thoughts? Questions? Confidence? I know I'm not the only one who sees this, so I'm really curious. For all of you who are in HR, I don't know if there's anyone here coach in their organizations or play roles that allows them to, whether it's do leadership development programs. Like, does anyone here do that? Okay.
I've more been trying to work on women helping women because I, for over 16 years, was in the aviation industry, which is very male dominated.
Yes.
And what I really, as I got older, what you really realize is sometimes women are our own worst enemy. And so my goal was to try to get the women to partner together
Mhm.
and to build each other up. If this one had their strength, whether it was in their financial piece and the other one had it in product management, but to really help each other rather than, I would always tell a lot of the women that I would work with is, you give all of the senior men that have these ideas about how women are, or the cats and the orchids, you guys are giving them even more of them. So make it the opposite. Build each other up, educate each other, and, you know, women can become more powerful if we would learn to work together rather than try to tear each other apart. That was my point.
That is perfect, because I have this story I read about a few years ago that's really fascinated me, because it was about some women in MI6, which is the intelligence unit in the UK, similar to the CIA here. And this was in, I believe, in the 80s. A few of them were in analyst roles, and they realized that they were never getting promoted. And these were highly educated women, just like the men. And so one of the things they did is many of them decided one day, you know what, we're all gonna come together, and we're going to actually start making some demands that were also promoted along with the men. And we also did the field work. And they literally got, it was I think about 32 of them, and they did exactly that. And lo and behold, they all went together to senior management, started making some demands. It worked. Because it wasn't just one person getting up and speaking up, it was actually a group of people. And they realized we were extremely competent, they could do the work, and they wanted to. And so I tell that story because I find it that this whole idea of collaboration can be difficult when there's a scarcity mindset. And that can happen in minority groups. When there's only a few of us, all right, we're going for the little that's left over to us. So I gotta get that. And if it's this, there's gonna be one seat, it's gonna be mine. So I have to like sack you to get to it. And that's a scarcity mindset. And that so unfortunately happens a little too much. And I always wonder, is it really fun being the only woman at the table? Like, really? With 12 other men? Not for me.
Is it fun being the only guy in the room?
Tell me, is it?
That's pretty nice,
Yes, yes.
In our company, our CEO is a woman. And most of the executives we have in the executive suite, we have 2 men and the rest are women. There's got eight women.
Wow.
And 2 are men. And in the medical field, it's a predominant medical field. And one of the initiatives that they have us working on, and I'm in people development, so
Right.
this is exactly what I do, is help to train our leaders to better communicate with one another.
To me, what's great about that is when you start thinking about areas of collaboration, which is the third C. And I think this is one of the ones that is probably the lowest hanging fruit, and probably one of the most underutilized aspect of how we could better work in HR, is collaboration requires a level of trust, right? Within and among each other. If I don't trust you, it's gonna be really hard for me to collaborate with you. If I am just like, oh, I'm not sure this guy's gonna take my idea and just pretend like it's his, and then it's hard, right? Because it's like, I feel like I have to look out for myself. Like, what do you think can be done to try to eliminate some of these trust issues? Like, what are some tactics or approaches or processes? Like, so for collaboration, I think one way in organizations we can foster it more is design thinking. Is anyone here familiar or not familiar with design thinking? Okay, I know design thinking. Design thinking is a process of problem solving that designers and inventors have been using since forever. And the difference is now the business world, like the last 10 to 20 years, have codified that process to develop products better. Design thinking is a process that it can bring people to collaborate, to create new things, and starts to build trust because you're actually doing something together. You're going through the process, and it's a fun process. You use Post-its, you create different structures, and this is what the process would look like. Where in the beginning you do everything from examining what the problem is, and then you examine it by, you ask it in different ways, like what might this be? How might I do this? How might I solve this problem? To digging in a little bit deeper, and that allows you to start reframing the actual problem. Yet you don't get to the solution probably all the way until the end. The idea is not to get to the solution right away, which is what most of us want to do. We just want an answer and move on. It's actually the idea is going through the process helps build trust, camaraderie, understanding amongst each other, and additionally, you start to create a solution that everybody has bought into because they were part of creating it. So you don't have to sell it that hard to people because they actually have a part in developing this process. Has anyone here used design thinking in their organization within HR? Okay, so it's like the hottest thing in HR right now. A lot of organizations are increasingly using it, and particularly in HR, when they're thinking about how they can, they see their employees more as customers, thinking more customer-centric approach to being able to get them to tell you some of what they need, right? Get them to actually talk back to you. Get them to solve some of these problems.